All right, welcome back. We got a great podcast today. Derek is from Florida today, sunny Florida. One of his
Can't beat it.
his favorite place on earth. I guess Jersey's number 2, right?
I mean, we'll get there.
We have a fantastic guest today, Coach Surace from Princeton, head coach for four Ivy League championships. Been to the NCAA tournament for FCS. His team has done tremendous things since he's taken over the program. He was an NFL coach for a few years, and before that, he played as well at Princeton, and he was an All Ivy League player. So he's kind of been through each facet of it, which I think is really interesting. He is really I don't want to say a senior tenured guy and age him at all, but he's a senior tenured guy there in the Ivy League, and really has. And we're based in New Jersey. It's one of those programs. I have season tickets to Princeton games. I go and enjoy Princeton games, and as many times as I've talked about, basically it came down to like UConn and Princeton, and the people that love me at UConn would say I made the right choice, and the people who know a lot about success in life would say I made the wrong choice. So without further ado, let's bring on Coach Surace. Coach, what's going on?
How we doing? How you doing, guys?
Coach, appreciate you coming on. Thanks for taking the time.
It's really great to have you on. Talk some Princeton football. Before we deep dive into everything, because I think your experience and being through a lot of different phases in the recruiting process and being at the Ivy League and being one of the elder statesmen, wink, wink, of the Ivy League, right? You really have a lot of experience, but talk about, and I touched on it briefly, like playing background, coaching background, how you got to Princeton.
Well, first off, Derek, we were just, talking. If David was like 2 years older, I would have hosted him and he would have been a Tiger, right? My brother hosted
I heard a little bit of the conversation.
Yeah, my brother hosted him and failed. And just a few years before him, I got Keith Elias, which I told David that was my entry into coaching, but I would not have lost him.
100%. Listen, that's something you always have on your brother, right? Like, hey, you couldn't do it. I know I could have got it done.
I was 6 for 6 hosting guys to Princeton, and I would have been 7 for 7.
That's a big.
I did not lose. They gave me Jersey guy. I did not lose Jersey guys and talented football players. So that was the thing. But look, my coaching background, I grew up in Millville, New Jersey. Mike Trout is probably the most famous Millvillian of all time. And my dad was a high school football coach, my high school baseball coach. He actually coached, Mike's father, Jeff, who was best player my dad ever coached in baseball, was also a great football player. But like probably every coach's kid, I grew up on the fields. I grew up in the locker room. I grew up on bus rides. I was the bat boy for Jeff Trout's team in 1976. I had every job from entry level on the sideline, helping my dad putting playbooks together in the summer, all those things, to statistician. And I actually was on they had a small local cable channel, and I was helping them, feeding them stats during the game as I was old enough to do the math, on those things. So I was around sports my entire life. I was probably the least likely. I didn't realize this, but when I got the job at Princeton, they have, when you're in a good school district, the real estate agents give you the rankings. I was at a bottom 1% school, and I was like a lot of the guys I recruit. Am I going to fit in? Am I going to be able to do the work? Is it all kids that are rich kids whose dads are CEOs at business and all these things? I was really worried about that in my fit until I came on my visit, and guidance counselor told my dad she never work with him again if I didn't at least visit. Make your decision, but you got to see this. And went there and realized, I played with a number of NFL players. The football was way better than I expected. This is 1985, on that. And the guys were amazing. To this day, the guys that were in each other's weddings, we vacation together, and really fit the people. They, just high achievers, hard workers. A lot of them are doing things outside of sports, unlike myself, but are really successful in what they do. I knew I wanted to stay in sports. Wasn't sure if it was going to be on the coaching side or administrative side. Through our linebacker coach, Mark Harriman, got a chance to GA at Springfield College, which was phenomenal experience. Couldn't ask for any better, with that. And I got my master's in sports management. And I had Charlie Casserly was the GM of the now Commander.
Yep.
And Charlie was a Springfield grad. I had the choice to go with him and go into the personnel aspect, or work camps with my own line coach around the country where all the coaches were. After my first year, I chose coaching. I literally chose coaching the first day. I started out working with running backs the first day. I had my room. Like, that was, I knew I wanted to do that. But, the rubber met the road when I was doing my schoolwork and I had these 2 internships and went that route. Worked my way up. I ended up being in the late 1990s at Western Connecticut, ended up being the head coach there. Every stop along the way, I had great mentors. That was phenomenal. And I'm the head coach at Western Connecticut. I get a call from John Garrett, one of my teammates at Princeton, with the Cincinnati Bengals. And it's random, what do you think about the NFL? Would you ever want to coach? I said, yes. He goes, great, because you're flying out to Cincinnati tomorrow. And I ended up getting the job, offensive line assistant. I was in the NFL for 8 years. And my wife, she was learning at a school administrator at Staples High School in Connecticut and the head soccer coach. She was not happy about this. And I explained to her, I am not going to, and we were successful at Western Connecticut.
Right.
Really good teams. And I'm not going to get, if Princeton ever opens, I won't get the job from Western Connecticut.
Right.
My foot's in the door as a finalist if I'm in the NFL. And when I got to the NFL, one of the coaches said, you get your PhD. And I did. I learned from some great people and great mentors, had an amazing experience there. And then, November 2009, Princeton came open, and I did. My wife actually believes me and trusts me now because I did become a finalist. And
only took you half your life, but it's fine.
Going into my 15th season is, you guys are reminding me how old I am now, but I'm going into year 15.
Well, it's funny because, you start out as a coach, right? And when you first start coaching, you're like, oh, I'm a young guy in the game and, I'm doing well and I'm young. And then all of a sudden you look up and you're like, how did all these years go by? And you're now the guy that other younger coaches start to look to get information on, to get advice on. And it happens. You think when you first start, you're like, oh man, I'm only in my 4th year of coaching. I need to get to like year 15. So people really respect. And then all of a sudden it happens,
Bang.
Bang.
Yeah. I went from coaching guys older than me. We had kids at the same time in the NFL. I was 30 to our women's soccer coach at Princeton reminded me the other day. And it's kind of the beauty of what we do and having to be able to adapt, and the great coaches all do that. Every year we get older, but the kids stay the same age.
That's right.
Right. If you're coaching a high school or college, it's a defined age group we're coaching. And, I'm hitting, mid 50s right now, and they're still 20.
Right. And it really in coaching, in your mid 50s, you're actually, as a head coach, you're actually very young. It's only because, you see a lot of press with like a lot of young guys and maybe in like their late 30s or maybe early 40s getting jobs, which obviously in the older days wasn't really as big a thing. That was kind of a rarer thing. But I think it also probably has to do with some of the recruiting rigor that goes on now in college. I mean, you could probably speak to that more than anybody.
Yeah, it's a little bit recruiting and relationships and having teenage kids, the last 7, 8, 9 years, has helped me stay in that pool of that environment, but just relationships. Like I am very actively engaged in that. But I do think the one thing, and it's funny, you know, I'm not a video game guy, and I've learned to use technology, even though I was worried this might not work today. Everybody, all the people that can help me are in Florida right now for me. So, you know, me getting on, I was a little worried last night. I didn't want to like have you worry until you sent me the text. I was like,
Yeah,
you're good, coach.
You know, I'm on my
You're
own
good.
today, so I don't know if I got this. But
listen, if we could get Tony DeMeo to have this thing work, you're good, coach.
Yeah, but the use of technology and look, I don't follow, you know, but I've learned follow these gurus who can, you know, do things on Twitter, on X, I guess now,
right.
And look at what they're saying, look at what they're doing that way. I know every kid opened up college football last weekend, and they're running their playbooks and
100%.
the minds, and even, you know, you're involved in the 7-on-7 world.
Right.
I got here, and quarterbacks and receivers and DBs, they are so much further along. You know, we were talking about the progress at Princeton. You had freshman football back in 1986.
Right.
You had, then you know, your sophomore year, you had upperclassmen, and there was this, you know, now kids are further along, especially at the positions that don't require physical, you know, this enormous physical strength. The backs, the receivers, the DBs can be way more immediately competitive, because football's become something they can do year round, whether it is playing a video game or looking up on their technology, or the 7-on-7 circuit, when used right, is awesome for them.
Yeah, and I've noticed it. You know, I've come to your games and I've watched, you know, your guys' offense, and you guys are multiple, and your Qs can all run, they can throw. They, you know, your skill guys are, I mean, they're like route running, and you're able to use multiple guys, multiple backs. It's really, really awesome. It's obviously, you know, a lot of the offenses around the country have continued to evolve, but you guys have a great mix of the run and the pass, and utilizing a lot of the stuff that everybody's utilizing. You can no huddle and be able to move at a good pace and all that kind of stuff, which is great to watch. I mean, I have to say, because I do have, you know, season tickets to Princeton games, and we get to like a few. You know, my wife's always like, you know, we have these tickets, we don't use them every single week. I'm like, listen, don't worry. You know, if we get a few games in, that'll be great. We'll have a great time. But I tell you, what we love is, like, first of all, if you go, obviously a lot of college games, it's hard to get season tickets and get some really, really good. You're able to get some really good seats. And then the Princeton fans, man, I mean, they are into it. And when you get to those rivalry games, you know, like when you get to games like Harvard or Yale, or I mean, every game is almost a rivalry game. You know,
yeah, the Ivy League is very much a rivalry conference where every single week is something, right? Like every week matters, which is an appeal.
Oh yeah, it's definitely it's amazing, the appeal of it. And I remember a few years ago, I had a friend that I played with at UConn. His son played for Dartmouth. His last name was McKinney Cruden. He was a outside linebacker for them, and we played Princeton. I was over on the Princeton side, and he was over on the Dartmouth side, and he had all his Dartmouth gear on, and we were talking, and we're like, can you believe that, like, we can even go into a stadium like this, two state school guys, and we're actually allowed to come into like a Princeton Dartmouth game, and we just had a blast and enjoying the game, and the crowd was so into it. But talk about like the Princeton atmosphere. I mean, it's hard to explain it. You can do a better job than anyone else. But when we go there, not just for the game, but we go to Palmer Square, and we go eat with, I bring my son, and just talk about the atmosphere and what Princeton is like as a whole.
Yeah, I was amazed. I told you, in 1985, my dad had to grab me by the ear and drag me to come up there. And to get me to leave, if we don't do well, the president's gonna have to drag me by my ear to get out of here, right?
Right.
You fall in love with the place. People care. The people in my life that have helped me, whether it's teachers, administrators, coaches, It's not a big school, big campus that way, but everybody comes back, like reunions in the spring. Mm-hmm. We have about 100,000 living alums, and 30,000 come back for reunions, and they fly from all over the country, right? And it's because, Princeton, everybody lives on campus. It's the dining halls are closed in, so you're eating in these small groups, and it's really part of it is this meeting new friends, communicating, collaborating, whether it's on a school project or the offensive line in football, working together to get all their calls right. But you're working in these small groups. It's a 4-year environment, campus. The social life is on Prospect, and they have these things, they call them eating clubs. Like, we do have to have some quirks, right? Things that, they're fraternities with food, where you eat as an upperclassman. But you don't have to have a car. You don't have to go out downtown. You don't have to, everything you have is right there, which builds bonds. And those bonds last, we talked about the 40 years. It's not just your experience in your career and the success you may have. It's also your friendships. And, my next door neighbor, he was from Lower Cape May. He was my big brother. He was 2 years older than me. Took care of me in college. He's my next door neighbor. His wife also went to Princeton. Both his daughters went to Princeton. They were both managers for me. 10 houses away, his college roommate was one of my college roommates. My godson getting married in a year. Like, it's all those friendships that you have and make that really make the college experience long-term. I call it a marriage, not just marrying my wife, but that marriage.
Yeah, I think it's a unique community from that standpoint, and it's interesting because when I was young as an athlete, we used to go there for the state championships in track, which I don't think they do it there anymore.
They don't.
No. Which I think they should, but that's my but I know that there were some things that weren't being behaved well by some of the athletes, but that place was great to go there. Jadwin Gym, and they played basketball there, and you had Pete back in the day. I think it was Pete Carell, right? Was the basketball coach, and I remember you go to a basketball game there, and that whole atmosphere of the Princeton, and all the athletics are in it, which I think I don't know if all the Ivy Leagues are like, because I haven't been to every one of them, but all of it's right in the same area. Like, I thought that your facilities, and I'm talking about now, your facilities, everything being in that, right? Like, the practice fields are right there. Your stadium is right there. Your workout facilities right there. And obviously it's an easy walk to any of any place on campus from there. Talk about the facilities are phenomenal that have been built there.
Yeah, it's not a reason. You don't choose Princeton. I get it. Every time a recruit comes in, if we weren't strong academically, right, you wouldn't have visited. If it wasn't strong academically that way, that's an attraction and success our alums have had. But the thing we have equal is time, right? We all have 24 hours in a day. And if you have to, if your facilities are far away and you're busing or, however you get there, and it takes you a half hour each way, and instead you're walking 2 minutes, you're losing an hour a day. And over 4 years, you're losing that time that way. So it's a very attractive thing to be able to have all the facilities in this one area. It's also, for somebody like me that was not the best looking offensive lineman, it got me around like the women's soccer team and met my wife, right? So, the athletes, on a serious note, the athletes bond. We go to each other's games. Our football players will be at the field hockey game, and the women's swimming team will be at our game, and it's created a community, which is nice. But we have this, we're the largest endowment in the country per student,
right?
So while we're living in this new age of athletics with different challenges and good and bad, we do have the ability financially to have facilities that meet the needs so our athletes can have excellence and experience. I think we have 26 Olympians, at Princeton. It's incredible.
It's amazing.
it is amazing, and we talked about it a little bit, before we got on. But one of the unique things about the Ivy League, and you just had one that just got drafted. I think, I don't know if it was this year or last year, but the receiver, and I can't remember. You'll be able to tell me the name, but I remember what he was an unbelievable athlete. He was a decathlete. He could do everything. Talk about the attraction that a multi-sport, a kid who's legitimately good at both sports, especially track. What is that attraction for the athletes there at Princeton, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, our coaches have a close community, and when I got the job, Fred Samara was the track coach when you were being recruited. He was here for 50 years, won 1 million titles. And Fred was somebody I knew when I was a student. I get the job 25 years later. He comes in my office, wants to make sure that we can have a partnership. And I'm like, really? Like, yeah, absolutely. Because we want speed. We play fast. We want fast guys. We want athletes. And I like the multi-sport athlete. They have more room to grow. That's been important to me. I think track doesn't interfere with spring football. That piece is great with track. Right. We have to work together with a lacrosse player. We had one terrific receiver this year. We have to work together with baseball. Again, had a baseball player this year. We had a wrestler. Our nose tackle was all Ivy. He pinned the Iowa heavyweight.
It's amazing.
I think about that. So to be a two-sport athlete, you have to be like way above. Andre Yoshivas, the receiver we had, we didn't really know about him. He was from Punahou in Hawaii. His dad was business partners with a guy named Mike Lurch that I played with. And Mike reached out and, can you take Andre on? And Andre walked in, looked like God's gift, 6'3", 200 pounds. He comes to camp. We tore him, comes to camp, runs a 4.4. And then he's a late bloomer in track. And the track coach says, this guy's going to be an Olympic decathlete. I'm like, sure. Like, I believe you, but Olympic decathlete, come on. Like, that's, top athlete in the world.
Right.
And that year, the heptathlon's the winter version of it. So we have we have our morning workouts and workout ends, and I see Andre, and I'm like, Andre, hey, you got Heps. Heps is the Ivy League championship. How you going to do? He's like, I'm winning, coach. I was like, oh, yeah, high five, thinking there's no way. He's never pole vaulted. He's never done half.
Yeah, he's never done half of what these guys have been
like, how's he going to do this?
Yeah.
And Andre wins the Heps, ends up breaking the record point-wise. He won like 3 All-Ivy, most valuable, athlete in winter track, won a couple in decathlon, spring track. He turns down the ability to go to the Olympics to do football. Just an amazing experience from him.
Done.
Yeah, so he's 1 in a million. Like, you don't get athletes. Like, that's a 1 in a million to do it at the Olympic level. And I just remember, because every Tuesday, Wednesday, we got scouts at practice for the last 15 years. Scouts with him would want to talk to our track coach. Right. And they is he a track guy? And that would just get our track coach, Coach Samara, he'd be fired up.
Yeah, so pissed.
I will say this, Dave, when you raced, it's, to win or lose, it's in milliseconds sometimes. Yes. So the level of detail to be great at track, I told every NFL scout, this guy will exceed expectations because he understands detail. Andre last year exceeded expectations, that way, 4 touchdown catches, all these other things, because while other guys, it takes longer to learn and understand detail, he's been doing it, his whole life.
And that's the thing that I think is also has changed a lot with respect to the Ivy League, is that players from the Ivy League are able to go to much more than they have in the past. When Keith Elias went to the NFL, I think he was a free agent, and it was like a big story that he went to the NFL.
Yeah, it's more of a rarity, right?
Yeah, now you have players that are going to the NFL more and more from the Ivy Leagues, Princeton, even some of the other schools, and talk about like how, because I remember we talked about this maybe a couple of years ago, that if there's a guy good enough, and obviously a good enough student, right, to be able to go to Princeton, no matter what his situation is, Princeton has the ability to make it happen. Talk about, now. Obviously, he's got to be athletically good enough. This is a big thing for the parents here to listen. Be athletically good enough. Be good enough academically. But talk about the things that Princeton's are able to do to attract some of these really top players now.
Yeah, well, you think about recruiting, kids have choices, and recruiting's a lot different now than 2010 with some of the different things that are going on in the experiences. And it's become way harder to be a school like Ohio State that has not only all the things they have, but NIL, millions and millions of dollars for their 85 scholarship kids, maybe beyond that. But outside of the 40 schools in the Big Ten and the SEC and the Notre Dames and Florida States, there's a few others. We can go toe to toe because there's only one NFL first pick of the draft every year. I get 25 guys. A few of them are going to go to the NFL. Each year, there's 2 or 3 that get to the NFL. And the other 22 are going to be the first pick in the career draft. And that is important because they're going to work a lot longer than they play football. Absolutely. Outside. So, for those looking at that, our strength coach and our development program is second to none. We control that. So the ability for our guys to have the same strength program, development program, performance program, nutrition as any school in the country, because we do, our alumni feed in like that. That's important to them. So we're going to be terrific. So we can develop players to reach their abilities all the same. Now you've been to our games. We're not going to play on ABC at 8:00 in front of 100,000 fans. There is trade-offs that are going to happen with our kids. But for most of the world, we're going to go toe to toe because they're going to get education, number 1 ranked school in the country. I hope our players would think they're getting values, discipline, work ethic, unselfishness, things that an employer wants, that way. And then we spend a lot of time preparing them for life after football. And we have the ability through our alumni to do it as well or better than anybody. So it becomes an attractive choice and a hard decision for the best recruits in the country. And we have to get about 25 a year, somewhere between 25 and 30. We are going to lose some. And it's Coach Carrill, the basketball used to call it Heartbreak Hotel, right? Some of them it's admissions. They're not quite there. Right. Some of them, they want a different experience. They have a different, and that's awesome. They have a different journey. But for the ones who want this journey, it's not nothing's guaranteed in life, but the pathway is, if they just follow the template, they will be successful.
There's no doubt about it. Talk about I don't think people always have the grasp of from a job standpoint when they come out of Princeton, the difference in someone going to Princeton and what they kind of make as a starting average salary versus someone who maybe goes to a state school. I won't name any state schools, but as state school, what kind of difference can they see on average, from going to Princeton?
Yeah, you can be successful from anywhere.
Of
right?
course.
There's no doubt in my mind you can be successful from anywhere, but we're going to be a near 100% football rate of not just graduation, but success that way. Because when I got here, when I played, Princeton was on the top of the resume, and that was enough when I was a player. Coach could make a call, somebody from career office can make a call, and you get the job, right? That was good enough. Even when I got here, that was good enough. People trusted me when I said, hey, so-and-so. Now there's HR, right? They need more than just, it helps. It gets you to the door, right? To have a name on a resume. That way, it helps you when you play a team sport like football, which is, we all know, incredible for future performance, right? If I'm hiring somebody, I want a football player, right? Because they get up at 6 a.m, they put their time in, they work out, they go through struggles and know how to handle struggles. They know how to handle, all the challenges in life. They know how to handle. They're good team players. But where we take it to a new level is we're teaching them how to interview both in person and on Zoom. We teach them how to build a resume. When I say we, that's not me. I'm outsourcing to experts who know how to do the resume thing. So if they want something, like if you want to be a coach, you're not starting at $100,000, and if you do well, you'll make $200,000 or $300,000 in a bonus your first year. You're not doing that in coaching, right? Coaching is like med school. You got to learn a skill set. You got to pay for most people, you got to pay your dues, all those things to move your way up, because you're not ready to run a room at 22 years old that way. But
very difficult to do.
It's very difficult. And God bless these young coaches who are incredible. And they're way better than I was when I was, we hire a lot of guys with quality control analyst roles. These guys come into it. They are so much further along.
Absolutely.
I'm embarrassed to coach. Yeah. To think about what I did in 1990, coaching the running backs, those guys overcame my poor coaching. But you build a skill set through time, right? And in that way. So it's a little bit different. But if you want to be in the wealth areas, the finance areas, the commercial real estate areas, like things like that, you're probably going to start somewhere near or over the six figures. And, if you do well, if your company performs well, the bonus, and look, a lot of it comes down to the economy globally and nationally. But if that's in a good way, you're going to get a low to mid six figure bonus in December.
Which is unbelievable for people in their early 20s. That's
right.
It's a start on life that most people cannot even. And by the way, 20 years from now, you're building off of that. You have a great chance to be multimillionaire plus. Now, I used to say,
generational wealth is what.
Years ago,
years
ago when I had my very first head coach job, I had this kid Steve Maneri, went to Temple, and but he didn't come out for football till his senior year. And he was a basketball player, and he basically realized he was going to go to, no offense, Derek, because you went to Montclair State, but Montclair State was the only place that was going to take him for basketball, right? And he was like 6'5", 6'6", and a very good player. But basketball, those guys are so good; it's so hard, right? And so he comes in like the end of July. And he says, "I want to play football. Yeah, I want to try it." The kid ends up getting like a few offers, Division I. He ends up choosing Temple, and then he goes and he becomes an all-conference player, and he goes to the NFL. He plays in the NFL for 6 years. So and he always said, that money that he made there put his start on life in a different stratosphere than anybody else he knew. And he came from the same town that I had, Saddlebrook, and he said put him in a whole different stratosphere. And he's just like, the fact that you came out and you helped me, and it made all the difference. So when we talk about like when you go to Princeton and you could start possibly a six-figure salary coming out, that's a fantastic, if you do well, that's a fantastic start to really set you up for your life. And it's something that young people, I think, especially in today's economy where, if you live in New Jersey, I mean, houses are. You want, and you have to spend $1 million now for like a normal size home in a lot of cases.
And I want to be clear. I look at when I got here, when I went as a student, everybody was funneled into the finance world,
right?
And when I came here as a coach, because a lot of my friends, they made a lot of money, but they weren't happy, and they could have been successful in other things. Like, look, be happy in what you do. There's a lot of ways to be successful, but if they want to, when I coached at Western Connecticut, they want to do whatever they want to do. Part of my job is to help them, first off, make sure they graduate. And speaking of Montclair, 1999, in the playoffs, they kicked our ass. I got my butt kicked by Montclair. It was a
never
great
lost
game.
to Westcott. It was usually one of those weeks where we knew, like, by that second half, we were going to get a couple series, and that was it. But I wasn't going to bring it up, Coach. I wasn't going to bring it up.
Hammer.
We had a shot to win our first playoff game in history. We did it the next year at Western Connecticut. And, oh, man, that was a heartbreaker. But, my whole be happy. Like, choose the field because you're going to work all this time. I come into work every day, and I am at the place I want to be in a job that I love, surrounded by people that are just exceptional. So I want our players to think that mindset is opposed to just go into finance because I'm going to make a lot of money, because there's a lot of ways to have this success that you might not make a lot of money early on, but you'll get there if you keep working.
Well, you're the example of that, and and I think that's the choices, right? Like you could figure out at Princeton, you really try to help guide them to make good choices for what their own future is going to be, and be able to figure that out, right? That's I think that's one of the beauties of that opportunity to go to Princeton is you can really take that time to figure that out. It's obviously a fantastic learning environment. As you're coming to the Derek, when you're coming right by the stadium, there's a gigantic, I can't remember if it's chemistry building. I mean, it looks like state of the art. Like, what is that? Is that
chemistry building?
It is
chemistry building.
That's my wife's like, can we go into the chemistry building? I'm like, they're not letting you in that chemistry
they're
building.
Like, you ain't getting in that thing.
I will during training camp. It's the best auditorium I've ever been in. If you can ever get there on a Saturday and walk through it, the building is amazing, but it's the best auditorium. I will do team meetings and training camp there because I've never been in. I feel like it's the highest level of like a theater you could possibly be in to watch a movie. Like, it's awesome.
I think it's and you touched on it a little bit too. I think it's one of the appeals of Princeton too. Not just that you're getting set up for your future in such a way where, and you do a great job of, making your players aware of their opportunities, but also like those guys around each other in the locker room now. That peer-to-peer, when you guys are talking about, hey, I'm going to go into finance, or hey, I'm going to go into this, or hey, I'm going to go into that. And meanwhile, what's the common bond here? It's like we're talking about a football locker room, but you got guys in there talking about all kinds of stuff that's just totally different, that I really think builds that camaraderie. And it's just like such a huge appeal to go to an Ivy League or go to a Princeton, where now, I think guys with this new NIL and the transfer portal, they're really losing out on those kind of relationships that, quote unquote, older guys like us really, really, set us up for life. That some of those bonds, I mean, Coach, you were talking about your neighbors and the stuff that you had on campus for that stuff. Guys now, we're going to a school and then they're leaving and they're doing that. They don't really get that locker room vibe that we all got. And I think, the Ivy Leagues have kind of, in a way, they're really like some of the few schools that still kind of have that within their rosters themselves.
Yeah, in 37 years, we've had one transfer in. Like, on 4 fingers, I can say we've had 3 transfer out as undergrads and 1 transfer in. And that piece is really important. But, I do think kids look at stability as my wife went here, I went here. Every coach is going to say, I'm going to be here the rest of my life. And then their eyes are always looking sideways at the new thing. I think there's something to this is home for me. Our defensive coordinator's been here 40 years. Twice he's been runner-up for assistant coach at the Division I level of the year, Steve Herbert. I got 3 other coaches that have been Princeton going into their 9th year. I have 2 going to their 6th year. The coaches that have left, like we lost 1 coach last year, Mike Willis. I don't think he's even 30 years old, becomes a head coach at Marist, right? Yeah. Division I school. Andy Arick, head coach at Harvard. You guys just had him on. James Perry, head coach at Brown. We've had, some of the assistants leave to Power Fives or the NFL. They're not leaving for lateral moves, right? Because there is stability. There is, so much to the relationship piece that we have. And look, they are high achievers. We had a guy, Jalen Travis. He's going to get drafted next year. He's grad transfer. We've had a few grad transfers. He was one I told that he needed to go. Like, I coached O-line for 8 years in the NFL. He needed new voices. Like, his stock with me, maybe it can go up more. on that, and he can get NIL. But this guy won the
Yes.
John Wooden Award. He won the John Wooden Award, is the Citizenship Award. His ability to do things in the community. And he's probably going to be, I don't know, if he was old enough, he'd be president of the United States. All the drama that's going on, this guy will be president. Like, he is such a commanding, and I learn from him when he comes in, because we don't have time as coaches sometimes to keep up with what's going on in the world.
Nope.
And just having a conversation. And still at this day, it's not just the locker room, it's these one-on-ones, these bus rides, dinners that you have with the guys. It's not just him. You're learning from your players that way. And when you get a group of high achievers that are together for 4 years, they tend to gain something out of that.
I think you brought up a point too about the ability to grad transfer after you graduate from Princeton, right?
A lot of these guys do that.
That's a unique, I think, opportunity that like a Princeton affords, and Ivy League affords to you, because you can go there, play for 4 years, have that stability, develop those relationships. And oh, by the way, if you really are that good, right, then you can go and grad transfer. And I think that is a amazing thing that the Ivy League affords, that much better than a lot, because if a guy is at some point going to grad transfer, he graduates from your program school and he's good, and he has the opportunity to get NIL and go somewhere, you know that he's an elite guy. And I think it's almost like I don't want to say a crazy best of both worlds, but like it really does do kind of something like that. It's almost like
it's the world we live in, right? It's the world we're in now. And I can be happy, I can complain. Instead, let's look at it,
embrace it.
How can this be a positive thing? How can we adapt to it? You guys are 100, because the value isn't typically in freshmen. Certainly the guys we're recruiting, right? The value might be in Arch Manning. He's the top kid in the country, right? The value might be in those top 10 kids, but the value is in the guys who are older, because now they know they've developed that way. So they do get this experience. I meet with every kid, because here's the dilemma our guys have. Now, Jalen Travis, he also won the Truman Award. His law school's paid for whenever the NFL's done. I couldn't do anything else for him. So it was like, you got to go. But the other 6 kids I had, here's the value. You either, get this unique experience. We have a linebacker, Ozzie Nicholas, going to Duke. We have another linebacker, Liam Johnson, going to Cal. You get a chance to experience this. Absolutely. Or the internships are so much better. The same thing like NIL is better.
Yeah,
the internships they can get are better. So when you get a 5th year, I can set these guys up with the greatest internships they could possibly have, which is also NIL in some way. It might be a little bit now.
It's more of a formal, actual process. Yeah.
And I just sit back and listen. What do you want out of your experience? Some of them are confused. They want to go through it. Some of them know, this is what I want. Ozzie, I know this is what I'm doing. Some of them are confused. They want to go through it. And some are like, Coach, I want to work in finance. What's the best, connections, and what's the best relationship you have to get me there?
Really, really interesting. It's the perspective that you have as far as how you handle the guys, and I think the cultivation of those relationships is really, really interesting. And Derek brought that up, like that. It's amazing that we're in a world like that, but it is a unique thing, because you've had. You said you had 4 total transfers in or out in 37 years. Colorado had 75 the first year and 57 the second year, right? So there's like totally different worlds, and the kids that you're attracting are, like I look at it as from a parent standpoint, like that would concern, like if my child ended up ever being good enough to be a college player and a higher level player, like. My concern would be, I don't want my kid hopping 3 schools in 4 years, just because he feels like, either it didn't work out playing wise, or I want him to have some stability, because I think it helps him in his life. Right. And it's funny, because we talked about the video games in the beginning. I'm watching my 9-year-old, right? And the video game, I told this to Derek yesterday. I said, the college football game that just came out. I said, my son created his own player, right? and after the first year where he went to Nebraska, he rushed for 1,800 yards as player, and then he went and he jumped into the portal and went. It encouraged you, like it shows you who you can go in the game, right? So it's always encouraging it. He goes to Colorado. He goes to Colorado because he likes Dion, right? He's always on TV. So
Prime.
he goes to Colorado, and Dion moves his fictional guy to receiver. He he catches a bunch of passes, but my son's unhappy with his kid playing receiver, his guy playing receiver. So he jumps up in the portal again, goes somewhere, plays running back. And I was telling this to Derek, and I said, like, I'm not sure if this game is good for him or bad for him, you know what I mean? Because he's like thinking, oh, my guy doesn't get as many yards or as many touchdowns. I'm jumping in the portal.
So it's preparing him to be, instead I said it prepares you for coaching. He's prepared for the new normal at the power for the, Big Ten, SEC level on that.
That's what it's what we're living in.
But as a parent, that scares me.
Everybody,
as a parent, that scares me. Like I don't want that, right? Derek, you probably think the same way, right?
Right. But I also think, Coach, like, I think you handle the situation and you're successful where you're at because you were there. You were a player. You know the ins and the outs and the intricacies of Princeton, the benefits, all of that. Like, you understand that. Some other coach coming in there, they might not understand that or they don't get that, right? And now you're tenured, you've been there for a while, add your years as a player and all of that. Like, you understand Princeton football or you understand Ivy League football, right? Like, and some guys, they want that and understand it. Some guys, they come in, they get a taste of it because, hey, this is a quote unquote Division I job, right? Like, I don't even think many people even understand that the Ivy League is like a Division I conference, right? You guys are kind of just, oh, that's the Ivy League. They're their own. I mean, all of these things that now appeal and you have to have a certain type of kid that understands what it's all about. But I think you and your staff, guys that have been through it or were players there, understand what Princeton's really about.
Yeah, I think I worked a job until 2010, meaning coaching was a job. And 100%. I just changed uniforms, right? And I love the kids. I love the places I was at. I built relationships, but it's a little different when it's yours, right? When it's your people. And it's a little different when it's home, when it's your wife's home. I've had people staying over a house the last 3 weeks. It's like 14 to 21 days, college friends who are here taking their kids to Princeton camps or coming for our golf outing. And I love that. It's not like, it's a yes. Hey, you want to, and they can afford hotels. It's not like it's because we want to hang out and we're friendships. These are 35-year friendships. You don't get that. I didn't get that at the other places. Like, there's pieces I missed at the other places. I say this all the time. Like, alumni events and coaches have to do those. These are my friends. Like, they're paying me to drink cold beverages and red cups to go hang out with my buddies, right? And talk about what we all did, Princeton football. That's not a job event. Our president is Princeton. He's been here 12 years. Princeton alum. He gets Princeton. He loves Princeton. He could do a million other things. He wants to impact people here. Our athletic director and our athletic director's wife. I worked with 3 ADs, all 3 of them, Princeton alums. They could do our AD currently. He was a lawyer. He took a pay cut to come here because he loves this. He loves the impact he's making. My, the former one was at our wedding. We were at each other's wedding. The former one played soccer with my wife. She's now the LPGA commissioner. And they had to pull her by the ear. Like, it was a no-brainer position for her, but she had to leave this, that way.
Right.
So I do think, our career development office says, like, you can have a job, you can have a career, but ideally you want to get to your calling, where you're meant to be and doing what you're meant to do.
100%.
I think and the word is getting a little bit out because I see a lot of players that we work with, that we talk to, that ask, like, okay, I'm going to go to a Princeton camp. I'm going to go to an Ivy League camp, and I want to go there. I want to get recruited by there. Now, they don't all understand, like,
they don't.
Like, I try to tell them, like, okay, your GPA is 3.1. Like you're
right. Like, dude, like you're not getting in. Like this is not what you're like.
This is a different, thing. But I do think that, and I've noticed this little uptick in the last couple of years. Maybe it coincides with the transfer portal. I don't know. I really don't know the correlation, or if there is a correlation. But I've noticed the interest. Like players more and more have asked me.
Definitely,
yeah, right. And Derek, you would confirm saying, like, what about Princeton? Like, what is their recruiting like? Like they've asked those questions. Like, I'm interested in Princeton. And more players have had an interest in the Ivy League. And I don't know if that has to do with social media. Maybe that, many years ago, the Ivy League schools were kind of a Northeast thing. Not, you always recruited nationally. I know that, but it was kind of like the Northeast knew what it was. But if you were recruiting a kid from Texas, let's say, you'd have to really educate him on what Princeton was about. But today, that kid from Texas might have some information and already have an interest in it. Maybe he goes to a private school or he just is a really good student, as a good football
And I think
player.
that's one of the things too, right? Like I think that has a lot to do with it, is the more of the focal point on, like, there's a lot more private schools, right, at the the high school level and whatnot, and kids kind of going there. But I also think that like you said, social media, right, there's more of a vision, or like guys can see now, really it's not so much of a Northeast kind of, I guess, like you would say, like a good old boy club, right? It wasn't just like, oh, it's only people that go there are alums of people that have gone and whatnot. Plus I also think that like you touched on a little bit too, the whole 5th year thing, where I can graduate from an Ivy League school and then possibly have the opportunity to go to a Power 5 and play. And if that's something that you feel you can handle, that's just another way to go about it. And you're kind of double dipping, because now you're coming out of there with a degree that's going to land you a job that's better than most of other places that you can go to. So I think it's a combination of a lot of that. Plus, just overall in general, Ivy League football has gotten a lot
better. Yes.
Like competition wise. And you've seen a lot of these guys take that step to the next level, and you're like, wait, he came from where? And now guys pique their interest, and now it's just, a domino effect.
Yeah, you guys hit the nail on the head. You guys have been doing this, right? Long enough to, hit the, not only is social media, and kids can get research from anywhere within, we send, let's say, an initial email invite to camp.
Oh God.
And his parents can look us up like in seconds. But the number of times I've, worked with, you, David, like send me a kid, but the video is immediate. This isn't VHS tapes and DVDs. And it's not that type of recruiting anymore that took weeks to get video. It's instantaneously. So I carve out at least an hour every day to watch video, right? Just to keep up with the most talented kids that way. I also think where the portal has affected it, where even in the Big Ten and SEC, now there's outliers, right? I think Rutgers has 29 commits in this class, but where schools used to take 25, they're now taking 15.
Yep.
Right. And so, because they're banking on
high school, right? Like high school.
Yeah, they're banking on the
high
portal.
School window is now shrunk a ton.
Yeah, we're not looking at the portal. So those extra 10 kids per school, when you look at however many FBS schools there are, 130, that's a lot of spaces left. Some of those kids have great grades. So that's had openings, up for us, that way. And then there are kids they're going, and I had 2 kids, right? Go through their journeys. They had different things, but for both of them, the locker room was important. Stability was important. Looking at the head coach, is this head coach going to be out the second somebody else calls?
The next shiny whatever job opens up? Because look, Coach, I'm sure you've had opportunities to get out of there and leave, but that's your baby. This is where you're at. And for me, coming from a traditional Group 1 program, like where tradition freaking matters, and now I'm at one now where tradition matters, like that's, to me, that appeal sometimes, like that would overtake a lot of other things that would pull me to a bigger school, right? Or something of that nature.
And the thing is, when the schools do call, and a lot of them are the higher academic, or
Right.
I'm not leaving for a lateral move, certainly, like nobody's doing that, but when somebody calls, the thing is, typically you're not going to be on their A list, which means you can't do the things to fix the program. So why do I want to go somewhere that's going to be headaches, not have a chance to win, and deal with all the other stuff when I'm coaching amazing kids? I'm working with amazing people. The support from the AD and others is incredible. Like when a search firm calls, the conversation's brief, and I'm very grateful, right? I'm grateful that somebody thinks I'm doing a good job, right? But it's not, unfortunately, there's not the interest, in that. And these are, really good places, and somebody else probably is a better fit than I am for them most often. Or you're on the A list, you get everything you want. Then I have to talk to my wife. Hey, would you think about this? But it's because the money out there for that level is incredible. Like,
insane.
But I'm
but
happy.
Sometimes the juice just isn't worth the squeeze, and it is what Coach, you have a greatest setup like you could possibly think of. You got your dream job. Your wife's happy, right? Your kid's right around the corner. You can go see him anytime you freaking want. He can come home and do whatever. Like that to me balances out like money. It's just not even a question.
And I'm modeling, right? I'm modeling for my future players who they're going to have opportunities to make a little more money, right? And maybe it's a little more name on the wall prestige on the outside world,
right?
But why are you doing this? My dad coached and taught one place for like 40 years, was a head coach for 25 years. He had a health issue, right? Had to go to the hospital a number of times up, down from South Jersey up to, Central Jersey. And he had a former player rode with him. Like, this is like a book. Like if they captured the conversations, coach with player 50 years later, 40 years later, and them reminiscing, like, I think, the scare went away mostly because his spirits were so high being with his former players and being at one place. And we had a guy, Karan Reed, was in the NFL for 10 years. Great player, right? Mount St. Michael's in the Bronx, great player, captain, champion, long NFL career ended. Tore his Achilles, older guy, career ends. He's going to go to business school. The same head coach that was with him is the guy writing his recommendation, right, to business school. And he got in a great business school. It's that piece. And it warms my heart. Like Karan Reed asked me to write it, right? I hope like I can make a minuscule impact on somebody's life that way.
Absolutely. I remember Karan Reed, great player. I met him when he was in high school, going through camps and stuff like that. And amazing how he continued to improve and get better and go to Princeton and get better. And just, New York kid, right? It's amazing. Those kind of things. It's the relation. So the relationships
absolutely
are, I think that's what, and you talked about, with your players with career choices, happiness and choosing relationship, choosing happiness. I mean, those themes, and it's funny because those themes build a team and which relate in the end on the field portion of it all, right, to great performance, which you guys have had. Talk about what you guys are able to do from a coaching standpoint with your players that might be unique over anybody else coaching their players, that really builds that camaraderie. Because I haven't watched a lot of games. I see that camaraderie. I see the way the parents are in the stands. I know, a few of the parents, the kids that play for you, and they're so excited. They love it so much. Talk about those kind of things.
Yeah, I sent out a post yesterday. We had our golf outing like a week ago, and guys from my first teams were there. And I took a photo. My wife actually took the photo of me with these guys that I love that are really successful, almost 15 years later. And I wasn't a great head coach at the beginning. We weren't a great team. We went 1-9 my first year. We followed it up by going 1-9 my second year. But what we did was build a culture, right? They are the foundation of everything we've done since those first 2 years. And I regret not being able to help better so we could have won more games, in those early years.
Yep.
And I hope like they don't look at it as a negative, because, we didn't win. And I was a part of this issue, a big part of it, but we figured it out and they're part of the solution that way. That culture piece. We use the hashtag. Look, I'm older. I'm using the hashtags, right?
Yeah.
There you go, Coach. Right? You're in it.
We, right from the beginning, use the hashtag juice that way. And that's energy, enthusiasm, passion. I like people who have great attitudes, like that are positive, that enjoy what they're doing, that love football, that love, and they're going to get challenged, right? It's the top school in the country. They're going to get challenged academically. They're going to get challenged like anybody around me on a football field. They're going to get challenged on the field. Our strength coaches, our performance staff are amazing. They're going to get challenged. But how do you approach it? Our guys approach the weight room and they're going to work their tails off in the weight room or running. And they pound on the door before it's locked, before we let them in. And they are screaming, yelling, pounding on the door. That's exciting, right? When they come out to practice, they come out with energy, knowing I'm going to work them within reason, right? Depending on the day, as hard as they could possibly work to get better that way. They're going to be in a class with some Nobel Prize physics professor who's going to give them problem sets that eventually they feel a great deal of satisfaction solving. But I'm sure our players are cursing me on having them come to Princeton when it's 1 a.m. and they're solving something. But that's life, critical thinking and work ethic. Those are lessons and valuable lessons for life. And I hope they're getting those lessons through this. But the culture piece and the enthusiasm, like I know we were talking about, them being in the locker room and talking about these high level things that are going on in the world. I can guarantee you, we got beanbags, we got EA Sports, we got Xbox. I can guarantee you the last 4 days, the conversation's been about the same, trade and whatever portal and
right. Sure.
They're 9 years old. At 20 years old, there's 9 years old. It doesn't matter. They're the same age as your son. Man. They're doing the same thing as your son outside of their lift and their work during the day. But the other 8 hours, it's zero difference than what your son's done the last 4 days.
That's very, very true. I have one final question, and you were an offensive lineman. You're now a head coach, and we've talked a lot about Andy Reid and how things that he's done. He was offensive line guy, and what does a guy with offensive line experience really bring to a head coaching job? Because look, everybody you see a lot of times, this guy was a quarterback, quarterback coach, and they
the shiny positions, man.
The shiny positions.
Everybody sees that.
Yeah.
What does an offensive lineman, line coach bring to the table as a head coach that I think is real? I think I know the answer, but I'm asking you so people understand what it is that offensive line coach really brings uniquely to the table as a head coach.
Yeah, well, going back to that, my dad was a head coach. And when you're a high school coach, the greatest coaches in the world are the high school coaches, especially the ones at public school, because you can't pick your players. Right. If you're at a private school, you have a little more flexibility getting a kid maybe to come in. But you're at Millville High School for 25 years. My dad relied on genetics of mom and dad who happened to live in the town, right? That's what he relied on. So, he ran the veer. People don't even know what the veer is. He ran the T. He ran the wishbone. He ran pro eye. But when he got quarterbacks, he also ran the run and shoot when that was big in the late 1980s, right? So you had to adapt your offense or defense, depending on your talent, to that. I get it. Like Nick Saban, amazing, greatest coach. He got to pick his players. He could say, I want 6'1" corners. And if they weren't 6'1", and he could get 6'1" corners if that's what he wanted. He could say he wanted his slots to run 4.3s, and he could get that. That's not going to be us. I can't choose that. So if you guys watched us, we've had quarterbacks that are drop back
yeah.
passers. We've had quarterbacks that are athletic, dual threat. We've kind of based it around our personnel that way. And I think that way with the offensive line, having played it, it's kind of like being a head coach.
Yes, it is.
You're not, the quarterback's going to get a lot of credit when there's success or a lot of blame when there's failure. The receiver is going to get his name in the paper, running back, when they score, have big games, defensive guys with sacks and interceptions and tackles. But it's this, football is the greatest team sport.
Right.
And the value and the reason we coach is team, right? It's these people, it's relationships, it's, friendships. It's now that you go into coaching, it's the friendships you have in coaching. And we do this, like the number of people you guys impact is more than me, right? It's because you do the podcast. It's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people you guys impact. I have 30 new players, 25 new players that I hope to impact, that over time winds up being like 1,000 people that I hope to have a positive impact. But O-line is the foundation. It really is. They're not getting credit. They have to work together in a way. They're the unsung heroes. But as you're building a team, you need to have guys sacrifice. And look, every guy we bring in, typically, they're the best player at their high school. When you said people don't understand the talent, every guy we bring in is captain of their team, top player, you look at our roster, every single one of them had those accolades. And then they go to college, and it's no different. They go to our place or they go to Alabama. They're at the bottom of the depth chart.
Right.
And they got to figure it out, right? It's hard, to do either place. So they got to learn how to get on the field on special teams or to embrace a different role. We've had some freshmen dominate, but for the most part, they're the exception. They got to learn how to be a role player, to be a great teammate. They learn these other things. Well, linemen have been doing that their whole lives.
Right.
That's what they've been doing. So I hope it's building that culture piece. It's building that. Those guys are, we've had almost every year an lineman that's a captain. They're the big guy that commands the room, and we've been really fortunate.
My favorite year as an assistant coach was when I coached for DJ Nymphius, who you probably know pretty well, at Riverdale, and he made me the offensive line coach that year. So I was a special teams coordinator, but he's like, I'm going to make you the offensive line coach. And I could tell you to this day, those guys were the most enjoyable people to coach because first of all, I had never coached offensive line. Even though I had already been a head coach, I didn't know the ins and outs of the offensive line like I had to learn that year. And we've had DJ on the podcast. Actually, one of the funniest podcasts, if you ever go back and watch ever, is we had DJ Nymphius with Tony DeMeo on. That was just
God.
Oh my God. It was
Tony DeMeo with technology coach was like,
that's why I said there's no worries for you with technology.
No, there's no worries.
We can get Tony on. We're good.
And we love Tony. He's great. I mean, obviously legendary coach, but with technology and DJ, we're like, we got to have a re-podcast when we get Tony there. We go into his room and help him with the technology. But yeah, so the offensive linemen were so great. I mean, we go eat breakfast on Sundays, after games, and if they got certain amount of pancakes, and they'd be pointed to me in the sidelines like, that's my fifth one, that's my fourth one, and we would tally it as a group, and they were so much fun, not just the X's and O's portion of it, but they were so much fun in general because they appreciated, to me, the work that you put in with them more than, and I've coached every position, but those guys appreciate the work you put in with them more than anybody else because their job is a thankless job for the most part. And they're the ones that cleared a way for the guys to be able to score touchdowns. But the fact that someone was there with them every day and appreciated them and enjoyed being around them. And by then I was no longer a running back. I was, 265 pounds. So, I was actually heavier than they were. So at that point, but it was just such a great time. And I really enjoyed it. I always tell DJ this. I'm like, greatest thing you ever did for my coaching career was force me to go to the O-line. And it was more than just X's and O's. I learned to really appreciate players that really had to do the hard work in the game, because so many times in football, the offensive linemen are doing all this hard work, and D linemen obviously on the other side, right? And they don't get any credit. And I
Zero.
really learned to appreciate what those guys did. And every day going forward as a coach, there were always the guys. Anytime we ever have a problem, even when I coach youth with my son, I say, hey, listen, I'm going down with the offensive line. You know, you guys, I'll have a coach work with you guys. I want those guys to know that we appreciate them, because at youth football, nobody wants to play the offensive line, no matter who you are and how big you are. But if you appreciate them, then they're willing to, they're willing to do it.
They'll run through a wall for you,
They'll
right?
run
And
through the
and
wall.
also that's like, just to add on to it a little bit, like that's the group, like they get the most indie time together, right? Like
Yeah.
you're off doing special teams or whatever, maybe
Yeah.
like one or two of those guys, but bro, other than that, you're over. And look, I'll reference Montclair State, Coach G, offensive line guy, right? When we were doing whatever, where was Coach G? He's up in the stands with a marker board working with guy. They're over, and we used to call it lineman land because they had their own piece of turf set off from the field. Like, and we went as they went. And, he taught me, how much, if you want to coach, Derek, because you're going to be a coach, right? Like that's what you are and what you want to do. I can see it already. He goes, your offensive line, that's the catalyst of your entire team. Like how they go, you go. Whether it's, they do what they do, but that group itself, right? Like they're just different. It's those five guys, them against the world all day, every day. And, so coming from a program where my head coach was also an offensive line guy, like just taught me a ton about how important that position is and just have the utmost respect for it.
Yeah, it probably expands your coaching. Like I learned this. I had to every year do a study when I was with the Bengals when I was coaching the NFL on an opponent, and I had the Patriots one year, and Belichick with young coaches, he'd bring in these entry level, and he always had them go to the opposite side of the ball. Learn something new. I've tried to do that with our quality control coaches. It really helps them to learn. And
Beyond.
Look, it's so rare. I can't recall one time in my 8 years in the NFL with the O-line having one issue ever, accountability or anything else.
Nope.
But I'll say this, like in basketball, there's only 5 guys on the court. There's one ball, but that ball's in the stars' hands, right? They get their shots. You can't control it as much. Like if you want to double team the great receiver, you can limit the number of throws to him that way. And it's hard because these guys are getting paid a lot of money in the NFL, and they have a lot of, especially with fantasy football, a lot of pressure.
Oh God,
right.
That are from the outside.
Totally created a whole nother monster.
Be the decoy or anything else. And so you're always dealing with that when you're coaching other positions, trying to find ways to get your guys you pay the most the ball. There's only one ball. So keeping them all happy is hard. And it's, very difficult for offensive coaches at, at the positions outside of O-line and usually quarterback.
No, it's very true. The one ball thing is it gets harder and harder. I always say this to kids.
You got
like
9U this
7
year,
of
buddy.
course, everyone wants the ball all the time.
9U this year. You better figure it out. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I think I made the mistake of getting too many stars on our team because everyone wants the ball. But but yeah, it's one of the things that that's the hardest thing, is that there is only one football, and the way that media is now, like everything is so glorified around who has the ball, all the short takes and the short clips you see and all these kind of things.
Yep, all the reels, all that stuff.
At the end of the day, you're like, well, okay, if you're in high school and you have a really good running back, that guy's probably getting 15 to 20 of the touches, right? The quarterback has the ball in his hands every play, whether he's throwing it or handing it off, but he has the ball. Now, outside of that, those two individuals, okay, receiver, if a receiver has 4 catches a game in high school multiplied by 11, That's 44 catches. He's
Which
a
is more than most
star.
teams even throw it sometimes in high school, right?
I'm saying a guy has 44 catches. I can count on my hand how many times I've had guys had more than 40 catches, So it's
yeah, I was just going to say there's a lot of pressure, maybe
right.
not at 9U, but at high school, they want
Coach,
these
it
kids
might
want
be
to go to
more at
college.
9U because some of those mommy and daddies, they're wicked, Coach. You've been through it. You see it. They're wicked.
There's not the pressure of college,
No.
right? They get to high school and they put so much blame on the high school coach.
Right.
And it's really, the blame should go to us, right? Because we have the film. Even if you only had one catch, you have a highlight video, right? You have highlights. You have all the stats from your track or whatever else you're doing. We see the kids in person, all those things. But I do think sometimes it's really the college coaches. Like, it's hard to evaluate guys and we make mistakes. But man, the high school coaches I've dealt with are just incredible, right? They understand we're not trying to lose. We're trying to bring in the best kids.
Right.
But it's not easy. And we used to, when we were being recruited to Princeton had 65 spots because they had freshman football.
Correct.
That number is now 27 spots. It's not even half. It's like 40% of the spots we used to have. That's really hard when you recruit nationally. When Andre Oshabash from Hawaii, gets a spot, that's a spot that could go to a friend of ours that coaches a great team in New Jersey.
Right.
And that's where it's really hard because I know that coach is going to get talking to from the parent and he's got to explain what we thought. That's really hard. That's why I try to be, I try to be on top of things, especially text from high school coaches or emails.
And
I try to make sure our staff gets back because the parents are waiting for the coach to find out what we think.
It's amazing.
I think that's 100. I think that's one of the things we do
because
better
that's one of the biggest complaints we hear.
Right, communication. Coaches' communication has always been phenomenal. I think that's one of the
things. One of the biggest complaints we get, right? Like, I sent this guy a message and he didn't this. And it's like, this guy, do you understand? This guy gets like over 1,000 freaking messages and that's one platform, okay? And he doesn't have all these little, whatever minions that can help him out, read this message or read that message. We're not living in that world, guys. Sorry. I know your
email or text is good. When you get over 50 years old, email or text is good. The other stuff, I can't keep up with. It's just too much.
It's insane.
We have staff that keep up with that for me. I can't keep up with that.
I can't imagine it across all platforms.
Doing it as much. I'm not on it as much as I am these other direct line things.
Well, one last question. I kind of just thought of this, and from a recruiting standpoint, because there's so much literally misinformation on a lot of stuff with respect to recruiting. I can't tell you how many times a parent will, I talked to this coach and then I didn't hear anything, or, what is the things that athletes and parents can do? And I think it's most important for the athlete to take most of the responsibility, but that they can do to really get themselves in front of you camp is one, but let's say they didn't get to your camp, this summer. And then what's the best way for them to get you film? How should they cut it up in the fall? What do you like to see from a recruiting standpoint to help you evaluate them better?
Yeah, it depends on age a little bit and position. Quarterbacks seem to be committing earlier, especially this cycle. Way, other kids at other positions are starting. Maybe that position's going first. Other positions are going later. I think that when that's a great question, but it's everything. Now, a ninth grader isn't going to move the needle because I don't have their academics yet. Right. I really like 5 semesters, but some of these kids are just so incredible academically. After 4 semesters, I can predict pretty well how admissions is going to look at them that way. But highlight videos, you're right. Start with that. Start with your good plays, right? If you have a 10-minute highlight video of
Oh
your first
God.
3 plays, right? I mean, like
Oh
there's a
God.
process to it. I do think some of the kids come in unaware. We had a great player at camp the other day, and we had water break, then bring them back. I do a talk with them, and as kids were coming back from the water break, he's like, "Is Princeton FCS or FBS?" So I do think
You're
do
like,
some
oh
research.
shit.
No, do some research. Like I told the whole group, hey, life lesson. Any big decision, college is a big decision. Do your research. It sets you apart. Because February's now dead for FCS, so we used to get 1,000 kids come through. Well, I
Right.
did 3 Zooms. I had 2,000 kids on Zoom. They'll put questions in the chat.
Oh God.
Not at each one, 2,000 total. I'll put questions in the chat, and some of them ask questions that you can find out for yourself. This is a big
Right.
decision.
Right.
Like with my 2 kids, they didn't go anywhere that they didn't know, right?
Yes.
That they didn't have on their own know whether it's what fit them from possibly fit them, because you don't know when you're 15 or 16 what might fit from an academic, from a culture, from a standpoint of their athletic pursuits. That way, ask good questions. Get involved. Like if your high school coach is good, he's reaching out. But some of them, they got a lot of stuff they're doing. They're working. They got other jobs. They don't work in the school. They work in the school, but they teach 6 classes a day. Find somebody else that can help with that. They can send that's where guys like you come in,
Right.
because it really helps them to have an advocate, have somebody that's advocating for them that way. Because our database is over 20,000 recruits. Now it's 4 years, but it's mostly 25s, right? If there's 10,000 25s, 7,000 26s, and the other 3,000, 4,000 or 27s, 28s on that, because it is too early. I'm not trying to build it through the 27, 28s, because it's wasting their time to do a tour when they're in 9th grade and they might be geniuses. They might not want this. But yeah, do all those things.
That's a lot of kids. That's a lot of kids that you guys are evaluating. I think that's one of the misconceptions that people have. And I know you see you're laughing, so it's true. Like that you're only recruiting 50 kids. You have 20,000 kids in your database. That's a lot of kids, and that you're filtering through essentially. And it's one of the things I always say, like, oh, I'm going to go to I'll use Princeton as an example. I'm going to go to the Princeton camp. I went to, I don't know, XYZ FBS school. My 40 wasn't good enough for the, I always say, listen, you have to run a grade 40 at Princeton too. Like that's,
yeah, like that. Yeah. It's not
you're
enough that I'm going to
evaluating a ton of kids. That's kind of part of the misconception. I think they think, oh, I'm just using this as maybe an example of a 40. I don't know. Let's say they're a wide receiver and they ran a 4.75 40, right, at an FBS camp, but they're just really great player. Maybe they have the right height and size. I'm like, 4.75 is going to be slower for Princeton too. Your skill set will have to completely be insanely off the charts.
Yeah.
For that to be something that they're going to look at. And they kind of always like, well, really? I'm like, yeah, really, because they're evaluating, and you just said it. There's 20,000 kids that you and your staff are going through, and I think that's an important thing. Like competition, I think the mistake a lot of people make with FCS in general, but definitely Ivy League, okay, is that for some reason that they can get away with not being, I don't know, quote unquote. When we say the drop off, this is what the drop off to me. Like, let's say a receiver runs a 4.50, and that's like quote unquote an FBS guy. We're talking 4.55 at Princeton. We're not talking 4.50 to 4.75, right?
Yeah, they don't grasp that gap, right? They think it's like, oh, I can just be so much lesser of this because it's not even close.
Yeah, almost every kid that we've recruited the last 15 years, just like, you, David, like if I was hosting you, you would have came to Princeton, but you were between scholarship and in Princeton,
Right.
almost every kid's turned down free to do this, right? And that's, the kids that we are recruiting. Now, I've gone from being so and I love analytics, I love information. But it's just that, it's information.
Right.
Like, I want to see them compete. I want to see them run routes. I want to see them do other things. I've gone from just, oh my God, a 4.50 is better than a 4.52. Who knows on that? They're
Right.
17 years old. They're 16 years old. Like, who's going to reach their ability? Who's playing 3 sports and hasn't, specialized? Who's,
Right.
we're doing a lot of different data that goes into, what's their age? Did they reclass? Did they not reclass? Like, all those things go into the data that we're looking at, because I use this. And, Derek, do you have kids?
My first one's about to turn 1. She'll turn 1 at the end of the week.
So I use this analogy: crawl, walk, jog, run,
she's at
sprint.
it.
Yeah, like they crawl different points. Just because you crawl, you're recruiting, you're in 10th grade, it's crawling right now. If you keep working and, you'll hit your ability and it'll become a sprint, right? So the person who crawls first or walks first, having multiple kids didn't make them the fastest when it became time where it was real. So these are young kids. Like, you see it, like the NFL draft, they make a lot of mistakes on this. They're Football is even harder, because basketball, at least there's AAU, there's these international tournaments. We don't have that in football. We're trying to compare a kid from Millville High School to a kid from St. Joe's Prep, right? We're playing two different, and Millville's not playing a great schedule that way, but we're comparing apples and oranges in terms of their competition, who they play against. And we're trying to see, is the kid from Millville going to be a late bloomer? Is he going to develop more? And is the kid who's already made, right? Who, and I'm not saying this about Millville, this is other schools. I'm saying, I know when I'm getting a kid like Dylan Classy from Bergen Catholic, his route running is going to be exceptional. He is a college level football player, because he had the same stats as Andre Yoshivas. If you closed your eyes, said, which guy's better, and just saw stats, it's even. They're two of the best receivers to ever come through Princeton or the Ivy League on that. The problem was Dylan couldn't run a fast 40, right? Andre could. And as you go up levels, especially as you get older, the NFL is going to judge more on that number.
Right.
Those
measurables. That makes some perfect sense. And
yeah,
it's I'm curious too, like, does it, so I basically, you answered it. You have a great mix of kids that might be reclassed, and you have maybe a mix of kids that are on potential and are younger. So, and I think that's an important thing for parents to understand, that you could succeed either realm, because we see so many, and I'm sure you see it more and more, so many kids reclass and think that that's the only way
to do it.
Yeah. Everybody's journey is different.
Right.
On that, we get less like Cron Reed was, I believe he was 16 when he enrolled in Princeton, and turned 17 at that, time. But the hard piece is, we're dealing with really academic kids.
Right.
Repeating 8th grade academically is brutal for them.
Right, for them, they're like twiddling their thumbs, like, what am I doing?
On that, so we don't get quite as many reclasses. It's coming more now, because I don't want to, I remember when I got to Princeton and lacrosse was committing 8th graders. I hope football doesn't go to that. Like, these kids feel like, because it's physical maturity. You need that to play football.
Right, and that's where football separates itself, right? I think that's where football separates itself. How many times do you see? How many times? And what Dave and I talk about all the time. How many times do you see that 7th or 8th grader who dominates middle school football and then gets to high school and trickles away, and you never hear from him again?
Well, puberty comes at different times. And look, we had to make a decision with our daughter. She would have been the oldest or the youngest, and my wife, being a high-level educator, girls. Typically, now I'm not talking about all of them, there's exceptions. The social experience for a girl being older is helpful. We had to make the decision for our son in 8th grade, and it would have been a waste of time, because he was not, he's a good student, right? It wouldn't have made sense there. But Mercer County isn't Bergen County. Like, what was he going to accomplish repeating 8th grade?
Right.
He would have stabilized that way as well. So he went to college as a 17-year-old that way. It's going to be everybody's journey is going to be different. Too. Yeah, but you don't need the physical maturity quarterback.
Right.
You don't need to be able to do all the running and the jumping and the stuff like that. That's more.
If he's a left tackle, like, look, there's the beast that goes to whatever, you name the school, there's that beast that goes somewhere that's 14 years old and does all that. Most kids aren't 6'5", 300 pounds, and
they're the rarest. And that's what I think people, and a lot of people don't understand that, because what's coming across on social media, this is the 3% of what actually happens, and this is how they're basing all of their decisions and doing all this stuff. And it's like, please understand, this is like the very, like, these are the freaks of the freaks. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's like Micah Parsons. It's like, Micah Parsons is a freak among freaks. Don't compare yourself to that kind of thing with a kid in 8th grade. It's so difficult.
Everybody's journey is going to be different. And I've coached all the different levels. I've coached in the NFL, but the level up until now I coached the longest was Division III. I loved it, right? I loved it. Our players had great experiences. I did it at 4 different schools. I absolutely loved it. That's not a negative. Like, I say that at camp, I bring all the kids in, and we have like the NESCAC and Hopkins and Carnegie Mellon. We have these amazing academic opportunities. I said, they're like me, they're head coaches. If they tap you on the back and say, can I have your name and number? That's a home run. Like, they are incredible. So, like, Division I, isn't everything, right? You can have an amazing, if you love football, you can do it at different levels, that way.
Absolutely. And it's always, and I think I've opened Dave's eyes a little bit into that D3 world of how he'd be talking about something at UConn, and I'm like, Dave, like, we didn't do that Division III. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm lucky I even got a travel suit. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm lucky we got one pair of gloves for an entire season. Like, all of these intangibles that go into it, like, when you're at the Division III level, you're getting a kid that's literally there because he just loves to play football. That's that's just the basis of what it is. They're not getting scholarship money. Maybe they used football to get into a higher academic, Division III program. But the football is like, you got guys coming from work. You got guys coming, and it's just such a mix of people that level just warrants just a lot of different stuff that doesn't go into what it is, but absolute great experiences, because I started at Sacred Heart, and family issues took me home, and I came home to a Division III program. But I'll tell you one thing, like, there was a lot of players that I played with at Montclair State that were way better than were at Sacred Heart. That's not a knock on them. That's just life, situational. Like, I got to stay home because of this, or I need to go to Montclair because maybe I didn't do the right things and now I'm here. But Division III football, I think people get so in they get crazy about Division I, Division II, Division III. Like, just go where you're wanted, go where you feel comfortable, do what's best for you, and then ultimately, like, you're going to see success.
Yeah, development isn't linear either. We're looking at kids that are 16 and projecting them at 21, 22.
Right.
And as I said, the NFL's got way more scouts than we have, and they're making mistakes, right? It's not an easy thing to do. And as you said, if, guys I coached that we wanted at Western Connecticut, that's where they fit. That's where, and we won a lot of games. Their experiences were terrific. And, I loved, like, that was one of my favorite experiences ever coaching.
Yeah, no, this has been incredibly, I'll tell you, not just amazing having you on, but informative, really, like, learning a lot about the process that you guys go through and the things that you look at, and obviously, which has contributed to your success and the kids that you coach's success, and obviously a ton of winning as well at Princeton. Like, we talk so much about the other stuff. At the end of the day, you guys are doing a ton of winning, which is which is ultimately helps you keep your job, coach as well. Right?
But the process leads to that, right? You guys know this.
Absolutely.
The process leads to this. If the process piece isn't right, there's not consistency in the routine. It's chaos, right? And
absolutely,
it's hard to win when you're doing it, hopefully in a good way. It's
the right way.
The right way, but you have no chance when you're not doing it the right way. So that piece is so important, and you guys do so much for the good of football and the good of athletes, like young athletes, right?
Right.
Like it's really, these kids have ability to grow because you guys sacrifice a lot of time in your life to do this.
Absolutely. No, it's been great. And, we enjoy it. We love it. We have a ton of fun, talking to great coaches like yourself and really like learning. We learn. I was, we come out of it with, we learned so much, it's like getting a PhD for us as we talk to you guys and really, learn from your experiences and the things that you guys have done well, things that you made mistakes on. And we're hoping that we can help the kids, any coaches that listen to it who are on their journey, any kids that are looking to get recruited, the parents to help them understand it. Like any kids I talk to, I say, hey, we're going to, I'm going to be on with the Princeton coach. Like a lot of the questions that you might have right now, I would say about half of them are going to get answered in the next hour or so, because if you listen to it, because we're talking to you guys as the way that we think about things as coaches and trying to help athletes that we work with. So I can't thank you enough for coming on, Coach. You've always been great to me. It's always been a pleasure, talking to you and working with you. And I hope you get to enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend, and maybe get a couple seconds to take a nice deep breath and hang out with some of your friends.
Will do. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Have a great day, Coach.
Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Will do. Yeah.
That was fantastic. Fantastic
good stuff, man. He's. I mean, I love it. I just think
class act.
It's just so good. Like guys that he knows where he's at. He knows what it takes because he is a Princeton guy, right? Like for me, if I'm Princeton, like that's the best hire I could have made. A guy who understands the school, he understands the measurables, the intangibles, all of the stuff that goes into Ivy League, yet he's, willing to, tweak some things here or there to kind of adapt with the times and make it, what it is for, make it more appealing to guys to get into the school and whatnot. But, he knows at the end of the day, like, look, there are certain things and I would love to have certain players come here, but if you don't take care of business and don't do your part, like you're just not coming to Princeton, right? Like you just have to understand the kid that you're recruiting. And that kid himself also has to understand like Princeton is different, right? Like that's part of this process. Like you're not going to go there just because, it's football. Like you're going there for other reasons and you need to be prepared for that too, right? Because I think a lot of guys just see, I have an opportunity to go play at Princeton. Like I love that he said do your research, because half these times we got kids going to camps that have they couldn't even tell you what level the schools that are at the camp are. Right. Do your research. It's not hard now to go online and look at stuff and pull it up on your phone. It takes 5 minutes and now you're informed and now you understand like, oh, I don't really want to go to a place like that. Or maybe I do. Like, who knows? Do your research, man. It's not hard.
I think the insight as far as what, Princeton is about and the culture and the community of it, I think is really, I mean, like
and
I said,
love that.
When I go there to watch a game, or sometimes we go there to eat, because we're not far from where we are.
But I'm just telling you, like, I love that. I love that aspect. It's why I chose Sacred Heart, because of that, right? It was a smaller school. Everybody's on campus. Like, coming from a group one where I graduated with 100 kids, like, I love that aspect of it. That's small. Everybody knows everybody. You're in that, whatever. Like, that's what I knew I would thrive in that.
We're in this great debate on this on the UConn, like the group that I do, UConn Husky, like we started that Husky huddle with, and we talk about how Retschler Stadium is in Hartford, and we're like,
it's not. There's no appeal.
It's great, but it's like it's like a sin that it's not.
It's the same
not
thing
in
with
the middle.
the
It's not on
University of
campus, you know,
right, like
it's
the
a sin.
University of Miami. Those guys play at whatever it's called down there now. Like
Yeah.
it's 30 to 45 minutes from the campus.
Right,
Like
right.
whereas the Orange Bowl used to be one of the most iconic home field advantages in the freaking country, right?
Yeah.
Like Notre Dame Stadium, you walk across campus to get to Notre Dame
That's what makes
Stadium.
it, that's what makes it cool. Yeah, it's the same thing that makes Princeton so cool. Like it's all right there. Like if
The
you're a
swamp.
student, and the
Like
students
I
like
went to
that.
the University of Florida. Like you're walking across campus and boom, here's the statue of Spurrier and the swamp. You're like, dude, this is awesome.
Absolutely. All right, let's run. Let's get off here, and then we'll.
That was excellent, man. Great guy.
Great podcast. We'll be back on, I think, Friday. I think.
Yeah.
So we'll jump off here, and we'll see you next time.